One of my subscribers gained 250 rating points in 1 week using these strategies from my videos. In this video I will teach you about a very common middle game mistake, how you can avoid it and how you can use this to win more games. So I will be demonstrating this in a game. This strategy can be used in every opening, but this is a middle game strategy, of course. So first we do have to get through the opening. So for the opening I will just keep things very simple here. My opponent is playing a Queen's Gambit, so I will just play a very normal Queen's Gambit declined. So you can use this in any opening you want. The most important part here is that we are just going to develop some pieces. We are going to castle, we have some pawns in the center, and that is it. So a very common mistake so many players make is that they don't completely understand the imbalance between the strength of different chess pieces. And what I'm talking about, because it sounds a little bit complicated, is a bishop better than a knight? Is a knight better than a bishop? Of course, it can be true in both cases, but it all depends on the position. I'll teach you how you can know which pieces are better, because this is very important if you want to make the right trades. So many players just trade pieces for no reason and they actually end up trading away the wrong piece, and this will hurt them in the long run without them ever realizing it. First, of course, here we have to take a look at our pieces. So my very basic middle game strategy before we think about exchanging anything is of course getting more pieces into the game. Because right now, of course, this can become a very strong bishop for white. If this ever opens up, for example, playing something like this, I would never recommend this. You're basically opening up your opponent's bishop. These knights are about equal right now, and we both still have some passive pieces here that we need to develop. So I am thinking about improving my pieces. I could play something like pawn to b6 to also fianchetto my bishop, so that we can face off with the enemy bishop. That is a potential strategy. You always have to be a little bit careful, of course, if you are opening up the diagonal towards your rook, that you don't fall for any simple mistakes, but that would be a solid plan here. Developing this knight to c6, I usually don't like this, because you want to put your c pawn first and then your knight behind it usually. One other strategy is, for example, playing the knight here to d7, so you can put the pawn on c5. So now a very interesting question. Do we play this, or do we play b6? Since it's not super clear right now, I will actually play pawn to b6 first and develop this bishop, because in the future I can still make the decision for my knight. They are capturing, so I can just recapture, that's fine, and now we can play the bishop. And now we still have the opportunity with this knight to choose. Do we want to go here to the d7 square and support the c5 push? Or do we want to push c5 and then, for example, after they take, we can even recapture with the pawn here, and then we can develop the knight in the future. So again, we have the choice between these two moves, but I will play the most simple move here, which is to put the knight on d7 first and support this push on c5. And now that all pieces have been developed, my middle game strategy will be very useful for you. So in the middle game, of course, a bunch of pieces will be traded as well, especially the minor pieces, the knights and the bishops. But we want to make sure that every trade is in our advantage. So the way to think about this is there are two things you have to keep in mind. One is the center, and you have to take a look, is the center closed, open, or semi-closed? So this center, in my opinion, is semi-closed. Why do I say that? Well, you can see that our bishops are actually limited because of these pawns. And this bishop is also limited because of this pawn. So that's why I'm saying this is semi-closed, since you can see the bishops are limited, but of course you can already imagine that if I play a move, for example, they play this, all of a sudden things are opening up. So it's not closed forever. Some positions are closed kind of forever. For example, if this pawn was here and I maybe had a pawn here on this square as well, and they were all locked. So this is a semi-closed center or semi-open center. So that means the center is very dynamic. If it opens up, the bishops will be stronger. If it stays closed, the knights will currently be stronger. So that is something to keep in mind. What I want to do now is I want to see if there is a way I can optimize my pieces, because just developing them once is not the right approach. I might want to optimize them, or I might also want to activate some of my rooks as well, because they are currently not yet in the game. So I'm actually going to do that first, activate the rook, and I'm going to wait to see what my opponent is playing. Okay, and now this is a very interesting moment where I can demonstrate this strategy. So One thing many players would do is just immediately capture this knight because it's a trade. It seems like it's equal knight for knight. But of course here, one, you are getting attacked. You have to move your knight. I'm not really sure why, where we are going to go, I mean. And then also you lose the d5 pawn here. So of course you cannot just trade. One other thing I'm thinking is, do I actually want to give away a knight for a knight in this position? Because we already determined that currently knights are a little bit stronger than bishops because they can jump to those squares supported by the pawns and the center is semi-closed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play bishop to d6 with the idea that I wouldn't mind it if I could trade my bishop for a knight, because then one of the knights is gone and I basically have the upper hand because I will have two knights versus one. They are playing a knight here to c4, which is a highly complex move because of course if we take, they can take here on b7, so we have to be very careful. And also they are threatening to double our pawns and ruin our pawn structure and create isolated double pawns. I don't want that to happen, so I'm actually going to move my bishop again. And this is a super smart move because now, as you can see, two knights were under attack at the same time. So even if they save one, I am 100% certain here that I can always trade away my bishop for this one knight. So that is also what I'm going to do here. That is the trade I am going to make. All right, but now we have done something very important. We have created an imbalance in the minor pieces. Now it's two knights and a bishop versus two bishops and a knight. So we have to make sure we keep the center as closed as we possibly can for now. Because if the center opens up, suddenly the bishops will be stronger and we will have a disadvantage. So we have to keep this in mind. So I'm thinking about moves like, for example, pawn to c6, strengthening the center. That's something I'm just going to play immediately. Okay, my bishop gets a little bit weaker, but it's not a huge problem here since I mainly want to think about activating my knights. Okay, that's fine. The center is closed. The question is, what do we do now? Well, there are a couple of things you can do. One is, of course, we can try to use this closed structure and the knight advantage we have to put our knights on better squares. So for example, playing something like knight here to e4 is interesting since we are activating a knight in the center. But of course, there might be a case to be made that we are basically just changing this into a bishop versus bishop, knight versus knight situation again. So I'm not going to play this. Instead, I'm trying to see if there is some square which would be better for my knight. And especially this knight currently is my worst piece. It's not doing anything at all. So I'm going to play knight to f8 as a reroute maneuver. I can reroute this knight and I can basically play it to e6 or I can play it here to g6 because of course I'm trying to see if I can improve my knights. This is possible. We are blocking up a rook. This is also possible and I think a little bit better here since we are not blocking up a rook. So I'm going to play this, and as you can see we are just thinking about slowly improving our pieces. And the goal is that we keep improving our pieces and eventually there will be a point where we can either win material or there will be a very big weakness in our opponent's camp that we can attack. Okay, so again, black to move. There are pawn pushes we could do here as well, but I'm mainly first always checking if I can optimize my pieces. This bishop is very bad. Putting it on this diagonal would be nice, but of course we would also be losing this pawn. So there is something to be said about at one point here strengthening this pawn as well. The knights are currently fine in my opinion. We could potentially jump into the center if we wanted to. But then we could potentially get an exchange as well. So I'm not going to go for that immediately. So my knights are fine. My bishop cannot move. So now I have to make a decision. Do I want to activate the rook here on this file? Or maybe there is a pawn push we can do. And of course, we want to limit our opponent's bishops as much as possible. White is now trying to activate their bishop, which is the opposite of what we want. So I'm actually going to play a5 and attack this bishop and see if we can make it move, because I'm trying to force it to go to a less optimal square. Maybe in the future even go all in with the pushes and then see here if we can lock the bishop out. But playing this immediately, of course, would be giving this square to the enemy bishop. So we are not going to play that. Instead, I'm going to keep focus on optimizing. So I'm just going to optimize the queen. They also optimize their queen. And now again, I'm seeing is there something we can do. My knights are fine. The center is closed. We want to keep it that way. So if this is fine and the center is closed, where do we want to play? We want to play on the queen side. So I'm going to play pawn to a4. I'm basically having a little bit of a fight here with this bishop. And now, by playing the queen to d7, I also solved this very simple problem that this bishop, which was our worst piece, can all of a sudden now activate as well along this diagonal. So they have to move the queen. Okay, so you can see we are slowly making progress, and slowly but surely we are going to get a winning position because we keep thinking about these minor pieces. So our knights are still fine, center is still closed, that queen and rook here are fine. So basically I'm just looking at, is there something here I can do on the queen side. I could play bishop to b5, it's a slight improvement. I could also grab this, because of course that increases the strength of my rook by a lot. And then I'm going to play bishop to b5 as well, so my rook is opened up. So you can see I'm just always thinking about how can I optimize, how can I improve my pieces. A very terrible move here, for example, would be something like a pawn to c5, because they can take. Well, first of all, we would be losing a pawn, but second of all, you can see that everything is collapsing, and suddenly the bishops become way stronger. So I want to keep this structure very solid if I can for a long time. So this is solid, I want to keep this that way. My rooks are better than his rooks. My bishop is actually better than his bishops, or you could say maybe equal, at least to this bishop. So we are still winning, but we have to continue. I want to keep the center the same, the queen side is fine, my pieces have developed, so I'm actually going to see if I can now start to create some problems for my opponent here on the king side, because that's where I'm going to focus my energy. They are proposing a trade of rooks. We can take this. That does give them the open file, but in all honesty, this open file is pretty useless, because there's actually not a single way for this rook to infiltrate. It can basically only use these 3 squares. So I think I'm just going to take this. This also removes one of the defenders here on the king side. And now I'm just going to continue with my plan. Of course, I don't want to ruin anything here in the center or the queen side. I want to focus my energy on the king side right now. White is pushing. So I hope you realize every pawn push always leaves behind some weaknesses. This pawn push leaves behind this weakness, so we can plant our knight in there, and you can start to see how our knights are actually superior to our enemy's pieces. Okay, and I think we have come to quite an interesting moment here. So there's a bunch of things going on, right now. First of all, of course, white had to defend. Because we had a double attack going on. If they played, I'm just going to make a random move. Of course, they would have been in trouble because of this check. So this was somewhat of a forced move. You could think, I can take the bishop, which is true, but our knights are stronger than the bishops right now. So why would we play that? I don't think that is a very logical move, at least. I'm also thinking, is there a way I can activate this knight? To the center might be possible as well, because this bishop right now, they can actually not really take this because they would be leaving behind too many weaknesses. For example, knight takes h3, or maybe even rook takes here, and then still the king is trying to hold on, but this doesn't look super safe. So this looks like a very interesting move to me. Again, improving one of our knights, and it's one of those cases where they can actually not really trade away with their bishop. One thing I'm sometimes also thinking about here is there a way I can sack my rook, have them take, and then maybe there is some type of follow-up here as well. But yeah, it's not super clear to me immediately if we would have something. So I'm not going to do anything crazy. I'm just going to improve another knight. So you can see we just keep improving the knights. White is trying to do the same, trying to improve his knight as well, and also attack this pawn. If we play g6 to make the knight go away, the knight can capture here on h4, but it's also somewhat offside, and we can actually do a team up with our knights as well after playing this move. Suddenly we are teaming up, and if the king tries to protect, we actually play queen to c7, and that is a huge problem as well. So I think we can ignore this in a way if we want. Maybe play this, so they have to move, and then we can go here with the knight. This is getting a little bit more tactical. For example, playing this move is also something you could try. Keeps everything solid, but we are moving the pawns from our king so far away. The queen could potentially go in. Yeah, I don't like this too much. I'm going to play this line. We are actually temporarily sacking a pawn, but we are going to win back the pawn by using our combined knight power. Which knight do we take this with? I think it's about equal. This one has a little bit more purpose here, so I'm actually gonna play with this knight. Plus now we also have 3 pieces. Okay, and they are trading. So that is fine. Basically, we were able to get rid of this bishop, which is a very key important defender near the enemy king. And you can already see that this doesn't look too great. There are so many holes near the enemy king. All we have to do is find a way to infiltrate the position. They are trying here to start a counterattack. It would be a huge mistake to take this because of queen check, and you lose the rook. So doesn't look too great, but we can ignore it and we can just go in with our queen. We are basically also threatening checkmate in 1. White is getting desperate, but there's nothing they can do, I think, except give away some pieces, but eventually we have a checkmate here. And okay, they don't see it, so that is a checkmate. Please think about this for your future games. Are bishops stronger? Are knights stronger? Depends on the position, depends on the center, and make sure you use the right middle game strategy.